Okay, please go ahead.
All right. Well, recently President Obama said that the American wisdom will put Democrats at the helm in the White House in the next election. And, of course, this shouldn't surprise us because he is a Democrat, and he has to say, in order to earn his pension from the party, that he expects his party to continue in its victory. And, of course, he has to say that because otherwise it would reflect that his entire presidency has been a failure and a misery and a burden on the American people, and they're desperate for a change. So he has confidently also said that the American people's wisdom will suffice, and that's sort of code language that if they don't elect for a president, at least he's still gained a little bit of honor. But we see the American political election coming up, and personally I don't think President Obama's prediction that a Democrat will automatically succeed him is guaranteed. It's always a possibility, but I think there are strong arguments in opposition to that, not necessarily based on the strength of the Republican candidates, but simply based on the psychological degeneration and upset and fatigue that the American citizenry have suffered for the past 8 years. And it even goes before that in the Bush administration, because when we look at a snapshot since 2001, the United States and the American public have suffered an ongoing trauma, mind control, psychological operation, manipulation tactic that has been designed to put them into a state of fear, panic, and trigger a global war branded as a war on terrorism, but really a global war police action that sent American troops and American money in all over the Middle East with this fantasy of somehow controlling the world and creating a hegemony. And that's been a losing argument from the very beginning. But it's taken 15 years for the American people to slowly wake up out of that. Now, it's significant to look at Obama personally. He came into office on a different election platform than what he has been performing and actively doing for the past 8 years. The American people voted Mr. Obama into office because they were so sickened and outraged and tired and scared of what the Bush administration had been doing that they were desperate for anyone. They had seen their civil liberties beginning to sunset, and they were hoping that Mr. Obama would be a renaissance that would raise the American freedom and liberties and the American old identity back up. But instead of a sunset, or instead of a renaissance out of the sunset, Mr. Obama has turned that sunset into the dark black of night. He has turned the American freedom and identity and dreams no longer in the light, but in complete pitch black police state smothering. And we see that just simply by the facts of his presidency. He's created an ongoing, endless police state drone operation. He's, instead of ending the wars and backing the United States out intelligently, he's exasperated and expanded the wars. He's continued in Afghanistan and expanded in Afghanistan. He's continued and expanded into Libya. He's now continuing and expanding into Syria. And he tried to continue and expand into Egypt. Fortunately, Egypt had a coup d'etat and threw out Mr. Obama's best friends, the Muslim Brotherhood, and their Wahhabi Salafist agenda. Incidentally, when I was in the Bush administration, we were specifically targeting the Muslim Brotherhood as the enemies of the United States. And then Mr. Obama came into office, and he did a 180-degree reverse turn and made that organization the best friends of the United States and prosecuted all of the military people who had been working to combat that terrorism. So Mr. Obama has come in and made friends and given money and aid and comfort to the enemies of the United States. He's funded the ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Muslim Brotherhood, Wahhabists into Libya. He's hired them into Libya to destabilize and remove Gaddafi. He's now hiring them and paying for them to go into Syria. And he is funding them and giving them the weapons to shoot down Russian helicopters and shoot down Russian jet fighters. And that is all 100% on Mr. Obama's presidency, besides the fact that He's grown the government. He's grown the regulations which stifle the economy. And he's really engaged in serious abuses of power on the surveillance of American citizens. And I've witnessed that, of course, firsthand in the illegal cover-up of the Union Bank of Switzerland terrorist finance connection that involved President Obama and his Attorney General Eric Holder and Assistant Attorney General Lanny Breuer and Gov Zakheim and his son Roger Zakheim. So there is a blood trail of dirty criminals attached to Obama, and one of the chief ones, interestingly enough, is Hillary Clinton. So I don't think, and in fact I'd probably say absolutely not, that Hillary Clinton will be the candidate, because she very well soon may be indicted for criminal acts which include treason and misprision of felony and aiding and abetting international terrorists, because when she was at the State Department and Secretary of State, she prosecuted a Union Bank of Switzerland whistleblower that gave us all sorts of intelligence on terrorist financing, and instead of relieving it and giving it to the American intelligence community, she covered it up. And she prosecuted this whistleblower, and she got $1.5 million from Saudi Arabia, from the Union Bank of Switzerland, to her president husband, Bill Clinton, and to herself. And besides that, she's been given speaking fees from the Saudi Arabians and from the Qataris and the Kuwaitis. So Hillary Clinton is up to her knees in the blood of soldiers and contractors and innocent people in the Middle East that have been the victims of these ongoing terrorist financing operations. So Hillary Clinton really will not be able to be president, because she'll be probably in a jail cell or at least in the courtroom defending some of the allegations and criminal charges that may be coming up against her. And that, of course, is going to be helped out by Julian Assange and the WikiLeaks materials, which I saw firsthand when I was at the State Department and Hillary Clinton's cables. And I also saw Edward Snowden bringing this material about CIA targeting the Swiss banker that Hillary Clinton had prosecuted. So there's a very big drama that's involved with the Democrat side. Whether Bernie Sanders will become the candidate or Mr. O'Malley is a question. But always remember, the American public are center-right. They're not leftist. They're not socialist. They're center-right. And that means they believe in family, marriage between a man and a woman, capitalism, entrepreneurship, and a strong military. But they're also fundamentally non-interventionist in other nations' affairs. And this aberrant decade has been really the most un-American decade in the history of the Republic. What President Bush started and President Obama has amplified does not reflect the great values of Ronald Reagan, does not reflect the great values of John F. Kennedy, or of the earlier days of the Republic. It really has been an experiment, and a monstrous one, in neoconservative religious ideology based on capitalism worldwide, which is simply a Siamese twin of communism worldwide. So the neoconservatives really are no different than the fascist communists before them. So we see Bernie Sanders as a possible candidate, but he is too much of a warmonger, and again, American citizens are tired of war. They are the first ones to get into a fight and will always win a fight, but the American citizens do not want to get in any more unnecessary wars and fights, particularly with the Middle East peoples and cultures and religions that they do not understand. The American people do not understand the difference between the Wahhabists, the Sunnis, the Shia, the Alawites, the Yazidis, the Zoroastrians, or any of the other particular religions or belief systems in the Middle East. The American people do not understand that. It's not part of their culture, and therefore they're very quickly beginning to learn any adventures that the United States has over there is a waste and is misspent and kills people unnecessarily and really destroys the American reputation as being a city on a hill and a glowing searchlight for love and justice and freedom. So Bernie Sanders and O'Malley may be a potential candidate. The other people on the Republican side, of course, Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Ben Carson, Lindsey Graham, Chris Christie, Jeb Bush, are all potential Republican candidates, but the only one that I think has a real chance is probably Donald Trump, because he represents an independent person. He's not an establishment Republican. And the American citizens do not like establishment candidates anymore because they are the ones who've gotten us into these wasteful wars and really have created the police state and are constantly demanding that the government continue its surveillance and its various prosecutions of American citizens. So the American public are tired of that, so that leads me to believe that they may be inclined to vote for Donald Trump. The other candidates, Marco Rubio, I think he's too young and he's far too much of an aggressive warmonger. And inherently, the American public also has a new love affair with President Putin and Russia. The American public, though they may not say it, are very grateful and happy and celebratory towards President Putin. They are clapping their hands. They are saying, "Thank you, Mr. Putin," and throwing flowers at his feet for going into Syria and destroying the ISIS terrorists that have been blamed for so much of the mishap and the confusion and the destruction in Europe and in various parts of the United States. So the Russian integration into Syria and the takeover of that battle space is a very great favor to the people of the United States. So any candidate that attacks Russia really will not be on the good side of the American citizens. Now, of course, the mainstream media may not report this, but they don't govern the heart of the American citizens. And I'm directing and forecasting where the heart of people is going to be come 2016. So they will not be with Marco Rubio. They will not be with Ben Carson because he's too soft and he's too dim-witted. As a surgeon, he may be good, but as a politician, he doesn't have it. He doesn't have the fighting spirit, and that's what you need. You need to be able to punch someone in the face and stand on top of a mountain and say, "I'm in charge, and anybody who wants to take over, knock me off." And the only person with that sort of grit and fire is Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham, of course, won't have it because he's a blatant, open homosexual who believes in no family marriage values. And he believes, unfortunately, in dominating and controlling and destroying the Middle East. And again, the American public do not want that. And Chris Christie is very similar. He's a totalitarian fascist lawyer who believes the police state gives people freedom rather than people having freedom by the Constitution. And Jeb Bush has been a CIA operative who's been running illegal bank, drug running, and terrorist financing operations since the 1970s. And he worked for the CIA. So there's all sorts of dirtiness that's associated with the Bush family. So I would just say, as the American political election approaches, let us look to the candidate that represents a peaceful candidate, not a warmonger, a man of strength, not a violent hater of Russia or hater of Iran, and a man that's going to let the world be alone and let them grow on their own rather than trying to intervene with them. Another great mistake that the president candidates are trying to wrestle over is the European migrant crisis, and they've not mentioned that this was entirely the fault of the United States. The one good thing that President Obama has done has created the peace treaty with Iran, a treaty that allows Iran to pursue its natural right to develop its nuclear power capability, to develop its country and its people. That is the one good thing President Obama has done, which I hope and pray the rest of the candidates in the political system will catch on to the wisdom and see that the world does not revolve around the United States. Instead, the United States is simply a member of the family of nations, and it's about time that we began to act like one.